It's a spooky old creepy local dude driving them, and he says, I wouldn't go there. There's been strange things known to happen in that house. And I'm sorry I read it in that voice because that's what it reminded me of. Hello everyone. Today we're going to be doing some fussing and discussing about a recent read that I had of an advanced reader's copy from NetGalley. Now, by fussing and discussing, mainly this is a negative review. And if you've already seen my Instagram posting about this book, then you know my feelings about it. However, because Instagram only allows for 2,000 letters or something like that, 2,200, something like that, there's quite a lot that was left out in that review, except for my obvious disdain. The book I'm talking about is The Writer's Retreat, and I was provided by NetGalley as an advanced reader's copy. Now, this book was published in February of 2023. It is available and it's received a lot of love, but it's not going to receive a lot of love from me. And I will tell you exactly why. Because despite what it said on that book jacket, book blurb, the summary provided on NetGalley, it was not meant for me. But everything about that blurb said it was. Now, this is something that I'm noticing more and more. There are some really good book blurbs out there, or summaries, whatever you want to call them. And then there's some that you can tell are designed for selling. And sometimes I wonder, is the write-up on about the book, the summary of the book, the blurb, is it based on how it was proposed from the author to the publishing house and they didn't bother reading the book they published? Because that's what it kind of feels like. Or is it the worst case, which I think is really horrible? Is it somebody has read it and then they went, how can we sell this book? And I know that's what they're for. They're for selling books. But, you know, I think it's a huge disservice to the author. You just sold a book to somebody that this was not the intended recipient. I'm not their reader she was trying to reach. You can't start off a book with the first words being F you and not raise an eyebrow for me. Seriously. And then immediately go into explicit sexual discussions. That is not my cup of tea. That is not my kind of book. And this book does that almost right off the bat. I mean, you are hit between the eyes. And to be honest, I should have DNF'd it then, but it was something I requested. Again, the premise sounded amazing. I was like, I can get past this as long as this is not the majority of the book. I don't think of myself as a prude. I read some pretty harrowing stuff, you know, pretty gruesome stuff. But when it comes to explicit sexual, regardless of what it is, heterosexual or lesbian or homosexual, any of those, it doesn't matter to me. I'm just not into that kind of book. Language. You can use language, you can use rough language with me when it's really appropriate, but it was so tied into stuff, it felt so crass. Now, this book is supposed to be a thriller, and I have to tell you from the very beginning, in fact, I just said it was a souped up Scooby-Doo mystery. It just felt like it was grunged up and it was aged up because it wouldn't be age appropriate. But it felt very Scooby-Doo-ish. In other words, I mean, the very opening scenes with these contestants that are showing up to this very scary, gothic feeling home in upstate New York, but we're talking upstate in the mountains, probably. I mean, I kind of was getting the feel that it was like the Catskills and stuff, but I think it's supposed to be even further out than that. But, you know, you kind of get that creepy vibe. You've got this cast of characters and, you know, meddling kids. No. young writers or wannabe writers that get chosen to go to this retreat. All of it seems really kind of, spooky. And then they suddenly are told that they're actually contestants to try to win their book to be published, but they are expected to write 3,000 words a day. And there's all these rules. And of course, the host is very bohemian, stereotypical, almost gives off a vibe of the kind of the old versions of storytellers, or not necessarily storyteller, fortune tellers. That's kind of the vibe I was getting from this. She's actually quite an interesting character. I kind of wanted to know more about her. And then you just have this drama because certain people have been brought together. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And you also get this constant feeling of having social current event topics thrown out there. And this is not that I don't think that books should reflect the time in which they're written, but it read like a laundry list. It's like, let's make sure that we hit every social issue out there. Number one, through my cast of characters, and through their dialogue, whether it's internal. And there was a lot of internal dialogue and it just felt like this was a laundry list that the author wanted to make sure you understood as a reader. She's sympathetic to all of these social, issues. Yeah, don't know why that was so hard. But, and again, I do think books should have those reflections, but there's subtle ways. And by subtle, I don't mean hidden. I mean just subtle ways of introducing it where, you give the reader the benefit of being able to figure out what you're talking about. And that's another thing. There felt a very kind of like taking the reader's knowledge about things and making it seem like we aren't all that clever. And one of them, and I know it sounds small, but it was a thread in the storyline that they talked about was something to do with World War II. And what ultimately it was is that the protagonist's mother supposedly was 2 years old at the end of the war, of World War II. Now, this is all taking place, in the 2016, 15, or up to 2023. Everything indicates that the main storyline is very modern, very today. That would have made her mother, having our protagonist, at age somewhere at the least in her 50s, at the latest in her 70s. Now, I'm not saying women don't have children at these ages, and I'm not making a comment about that one way or the other. What I'm saying is that would have been a big plot point, especially for our protagonist. But there's other things in the story which point out explicitly that this wouldn't be possible. It's World War II history, people. We know about it. Most readers have knowledge of it. Don't act like I'm not going to pick that up and go, wait a minute, what? And unfortunately, this is the part that gets me. There are so many conflicts around the world. I mean, it is really sad that we have this, and that the author could have moved this theory, this connection, into a different realm. It didn't have to be World War II. It felt lazy. It's like an easy major thing to pull out. There is plenty of conflicts around the world. She could have tied these two. And again, it would have been more interesting, plausible, possible tie. Now, plausibility. So through this whole process, this host starts getting more and more aggressive about these pages and getting into these girls' lives. And, and then there's this whole secondary timeline story, which I still don't know was really needed. But this is kind of the Scooby-Doo effect of a ghost. There's a ghost story or some type of astrophysical being that starts playing into this. And it's all around the spookiness of the house and all that. And the thing is it goes more supernatural. None of this is conveyed in your summary. Now, I'm all for supernatural if that's what you're going for. I mean, it kind of had that feeling of, I can't remember what they're called, if I can remember and find out what they are. But it's like what Northanger Abbey was. What did they, something novel. Sensation novel. It kind of went that way. From Victorian ages, but with a lot of modern influences. It just went over the top. It was OTT, and it just kept getting more and more ridiculous. So between language, and there was a lot of sexual references and going back to sexual moments, both in the metaphysical world and the real world. It just felt like a bit of an incohesive, jumbled mess with a Scooby-Doo vibe, like I said. And I mean, seriously, as I was saying, one of the key things is as they're being driven to this house, they're all in a car. It's a spooky, old, creepy local dude driving them, and he says, "I wouldn't go there. There's been strange things known to happen in that house." And I'm sorry, I read it in that voice because that's what it reminded me of. They go past a convent, but yet there's really not a huge tie. But it at the beginning, it's like a really, I mean, like it's a moment written up. And again, I'm like, oh, so if you had went sensational novel from Victorian age or that type of thing, then that would have been perfect. But this was just a hodgepodge of a lot of stuff, trying to be a psychological thriller. I wasn't thrilled. I was not psychologically. The mystery, I wasn't sure really what all the mystery was. You kind of figure out that somebody's got a little cuckoo, and it gets really bizarre. And then you have to suspend a lot of belief in that they're in a place with absolutely no cell phone. Of course, there's going to be a snowstorm at some point. It was a huge miss for me. But I will say, honestly, all of this negativity that I brought to this book is probably because the book was not aimed at me as an audience, and I was set off immediately by the anxiousness of our main character. She's just all over the place, unsure of herself, and just like constantly having to go through that with her, and that's just not the type of person I want to read about. I can be that person. I don't want to read about that person. And it made for really wishy-washy kind of character feelings. Like, I didn't care about any of these people, I didn't care about them except for maybe the host. Again, a little bit intrigued. I feel bad for this author because I could be judging her book very, very harshly based on what I like to read. And if there was a way for me to know that this book had all this in it, I would have never picked it up. I would have never been making this review. I would have never requested it. And that's a shame. So either when doing advanced reader copies, they definitely need to be giving us more information. And one of the things is I do not read other reviews before I read the book. It seems counterintuitive. So I'm not going to read a review of a book that I'm supposed to review, that I'm requesting for review. Now, if I'm going to purchase a book or put a book on my wish list, often I will read reviews beforehand, and that's why I'm making this. So if you haven't done the advanced reader copy and you're thinking of purchasing this book, just know, huge language warnings, huge sexual connotation warnings, and also just ultimately, it's a group of 20 to 30-year-olds that I just did not connect with at all. Yeah, it's just like I said, really over the top. So not a book for me, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. I don't even care if you tell me that you like this. I just don't think it's a well enough written story. Might make one heck of a Scooby-Doo episode if you tame down the language and the sexual connotations. But other than that, and I like me some Scooby-Doo, but when I expect Scooby-Doo, and when I was like 7, 8 years old, and now because I like it out of fond memories, but I don't want to read a book that's aimed at adult fiction that's a Scooby-Doo mystery with a lot of crass language and sexual overtones and a little bit of everything else in it. So that's me. That's my 2 cents. A little fussing and discussing. Thanks for checking in, seeing what I was reading. This is a mess. Not recommend. But thanks for checking in, and like I always say, keep turning those pages. Bye for now.